I found out my fiancée had secretly moved in with her ex-boyfriend just 3 weeks before our wedding. Instead of exposing her betrayal, I decided to give her a surprise before the big day, a truth that would make her hate me forever. And that's how I, Owen Mercer, a landscape architect in my early 30s, a man who prided myself on spotting even the single, almost imperceptibly withered leaf in an entire forest, found myself utterly blind to the rather blossoming garden of deceit right within my own quaint cottage. Sloane Marlowe, my fiancée, a self-proclaimed phenomenon of sincerity and a masterpiece of steadfastness, turned out to be a clandestine performance artist with an extraordinary talent for crafting alternative realities. All this just 3 weeks before the fateful day we were to officially transform our love into a perpetual matrimonial real estate transaction. For 4 glorious years, my existence revolved around the precise arrangement of flora and the meticulous planning of outdoor aesthetics. Sloane, meanwhile, was apparently planning her own personal dramatic productions. We lived in my cozy cottage, inherited 2 years prior, a bastion of carefully curated botanical specimens. My only real anxiety revolved around which exotic orchid variety would be most suitable for the wedding decor, certainly not who would actually be standing beside me. Then one evening, Sloane announced her top-secret mission of familial solidarity. "Owen, love, I need to expeditiously deploy emotional support operations for my sister Serafina," Sloane declared, her voice carrying an unusual, almost theatrical tension. "She's just finalized her separation, and she's truly struggling. I think I need to spend a highly specific 9 days with her in Charleston." I was naturally at our antique oak table, poring over blueprints for a particularly challenging topiary garden, when this bombshell, perfectly timed for maximum dramatic effect, landed. My attention, usually reserved for the nuanced curves of a hydrometer, was drawn to Sloane. She stood by the window, practicing her distant, pensive stare, a clear indicator of her imminent spiritual expedition. Of course, I, the naive gardening savant, simply nodded. "Serafina's been through a lot," I said, ever the empathetic plant enthusiast. "When do you need to depart?" "First thing tomorrow," she chirped, a little too enthusiastically for a crisis. "It's sudden, but her struggle is immediate." In retrospect, the timing was exquisite. 3 weeks before our eternal vow exchange, and suddenly a sister required a dramatic extended rescue. But who was I to question such profound familial emergencies? A man whose primary concern was soil pH. I diligently assisted her in packing, drove her to the train station, and bestowed upon her a kiss of utterly undeserved trust, instructing her to take all the time Serafina's existential crisis required. The first few days of her spiritual expedition were, predictably, filled with carefully selected social media dispatches, artistically blurred photos of artisanal coffee, strategically cropped shots of historic walks, all designed to convey an aura of profound, solitary contemplation. I, meanwhile, was engrossed in a particularly challenging commission to design the Central Park for a new urban development. My mind was on permeable surfaces, not permeable alibis. But then, the meticulously choreographed communication began to unravel. The daily check-ins ceased. Texts became as rare as a winter bloom in August, then vanished altogether. Her carefully curated social media went as silent as a forgotten greenhouse. When I attempted telephonic contact, the line went straight to the dreaded void of voicemail. After 3 days of absolute deafening silence, a silence usually reserved for a perfectly composted garden, I decided to contact Serafina, her co-star in this domestic drama. "Oh, hello, Owen," Serafina answered, her voice imbued with the strangely formal intonation of a secondary drama queen who'd just swallowed a particularly large and uncomfortable secret. "How are you?" "I'm fine, thanks," I replied, my inner alarm bells ringing with the gentle precision of a dripping faucet. "Just wondering how things are progressing with Sloane there. She hasn't been responding, and I simply wish to ensure the health of her well-being." There was a pause, a long, pregnant pause heavy with unspoken theatricality. She needs some time," Serafina finally mumbled, her voice a poorly calibrated attempt at cryptic solemnity. "I think you should respect that." She punctuated this with a faint, guilty expression, as if she'd just swallowed a fly mid-sentence. "Time for what?" I pressed, a single withered leaf of suspicion finally unfurling in my mind. "Is she suffering from a rare botanical disease? Did something happen?" "I can't really discuss it, Owen," Serafina whispered, sounding like a minor villain from a low-budget movie. "She'll reach out when she's ready." Click. The line went dead. That conversation left me with more questions than a botanical encyclopedia. Something was not aligning. In my profession, when the data doesn't match the expected bloom, you investigate. You don't simply ignore the anomaly and hope it spontaneously combusts into a resolution. I spent the next 2 days trying to rationalize Serafina's exquisitely awkward performance. Perhaps Sloane was simply experiencing pre-wedding jitters, a common affliction among those about to commit to a lifelong landscaping project. But the complete communication blackout felt profoundly, disturbingly wrong. This wasn't the woman I'd shared 4 years of my life with. This was a poorly written character in a rapidly deteriorating play. By Thursday morning, my decision, usually reserved for deciding between compost blends, was made. I called in sick to work, citing a severe case of rhizome rot, booked a last-minute train ticket to Charleston, and packed a small tactical overnight bag. If Sloane needed space, fine. But I, Owen Mercer, the man who trusted data over sentiment, needed answers. The half-day train journey was spent staring out the window, mentally preparing myself for the inevitable discovery that my meticulously planned future was, in fact, an abstract, impressionist painting. I arrived in Charleston mid-afternoon, dispatching a rideshare to Serafina's neighborhood. The townhouse, a charming brick edifice, looked utterly deserted, like a neglected garden plot. No car, no lights. Mail overflowing from the box like a weeping willow. I knocked. Silence. Tried Serafina's number. Straight to voicemail. Clearly, the supporting actress had vacated the stage. That's when I turned my attention to the primary stage of deceit. Sloane's parents' residence. Mr. and Mrs. Marlowe resided about 20 miles away in one of those coastal communities where every lawn looked like it had its own personal stylist. I parked across the street, adopting the sophisticated surveillance posture of an amateur private detective on the verge of uncovering a national-level conspiracy. And then I saw it. Sloane's familiar compact car gleaming in the driveway. My heart, typically calm as a still pond, began to pound with the frantic rhythm of a newly installed irrigation system. She was here, not with her struggling sister. She'd been lying to me for 9 days. I sat in my rental car for a solid 15 minutes, debating whether to storm the fortress of deception or wait for a more dramatic reveal. My inner Sherlock Holmes, unfortunately, won. And then, the grand entrance. Sloane emerged from the house, draped in a never-before-seen, wildly flamboyant sundress, her hair styled in luscious ocean wave curls, looking like she'd just stepped out of a high-end perfume commercial. She exuded a relaxed happiness I hadn't witnessed in months, a serene glow usually reserved for a perfectly blooming camellia. But what truly curdled my botanical blood was the figure who followed her, Jasper Harlan. I recognized him from faded, strategically cropped college photos Sloane had shown me early in our relationship. He was her university sweetheart, the guy she'd supposedly dated for 3 years before me. Tall, athletically built, with an effortless charm that had apparently never quite exited Sloane's system. He sauntered out of her parents' house as if he owned the entire coastal community, casually placing an arm around her waist as they drifted like an advertisement for romantic entanglement toward his sleek black sedan. My perfect future, it seemed, was actually a poorly photoshopped image. I watched them drive away, feeling like a single, unwatered sapling in a desert of treachery. The woman I was set to marry in a mere 3 weeks was clearly entangled with another man, and she'd been lying about it for who knew how many geological epochs. The Serafina crisis was, quite clearly, a cover story, as transparent as a newly cleaned greenhouse pane. I drove back to the train station in a daze, caught the next available service back to Asheville, and spent the entire journey home attempting to process the surreal theatrical production I'd just witnessed. By the time I stepped back into my quiet cottage, I had reached a decision. I would not confront her immediately. I would not demand explanations from the unsuspecting Marlowe parents. Instead, I would observe. I would wait. The next 3 days passed in an eerie, profound silence from Sloane's end. No calls, no texts, no acknowledgement of my existence. I went to work, came home, and maintained my precise routine, all while internally steeling myself for the grand finale. Then, on Monday afternoon, the unmistakable sound of a car door slamming in my driveway. I peered through the window and saw Sloane emerging from her car, carrying what appeared to be a rather thick portfolio and sporting that same unnervingly bright smile she used to give me when our love was merely a seedling. She strode up to my front door as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't vanished for 9 days without so much as a wilting farewell note. I opened the door before she could even orchestrate a dramatic knock. "Hey, honey," she chirped, stepping inside without waiting for a formal invitation. "Sorry I've been so utterly swamped with Serafina's situation. You know how it is with family emergencies that require one's full, undivided attention." I stood there, observing her master performance, wondering if she knew I'd already seen the dress rehearsal in Charleston. She lied with the confidence of an Oscar-winning actress, utterly unaware that I was the only audience member who'd paid to see the backstage drama. "How's Serafina doing?" I asked, my voice as calm as a perfectly still reflecting pool. "Oh, she's much, much better now," Sloane replied, settling onto our sofa and opening the formidable portfolio she'd brought. "But look at this. I've been working on some final, absolutely crucial details for the wedding while I was there. I found this incredible bespoke stationery designer who does these exquisite invitations with hand-drawn botanical illustrations that truly resonate with the soul." She spread out samples, fabric swatches, and venue layouts across our coffee table like a general returning from the battlefield with spoils of war, having successfully conquered the heart of yet another unsuspecting vendor. Menu options, custom floral arrangements, even a proposed seating chart, all organized with the kind of millimeter-perfect precision that, under different circumstances, would have deeply, perhaps frighteningly, impressed me. "I was thinking we could do the ceremony just as dusk settles," she continued, barely pausing for breath. And I found this amazing local jazz quartet that plays the perfect blend of classics and contemporary pieces. What do you think?" She was acting out an elaborate fantasy, one where the past 9 days were merely a figment of my imagination, where she hadn't been with Jasper Harlan in Charleston, where she could simply slide back into our life and resume planning a wedding, as if trust was something that could be rescheduled like a vendor appointment. "Sloan," I said quietly, "and the caterer has this divine seafood bisque that would be absolutely perfect for the reception," she finished, utterly oblivious to the looming iceberg. She finally looked up at me, and for just a fleeting millisecond, I saw something flicker across her face. Perhaps a flicker of genuine panic, or maybe just indigestion. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "I need you to return the engagement ring," I stated. The words hung in the air between us like a physical barrier, perhaps an invisible fence of unspoken truths. She blinked several times, as if her meticulously programmed performance had hit a critical error. "What are you talking about?" She even managed a nervous, almost convincing laugh. "Owen, if this is about me being away for a few days, perhaps this is part of our new trust-testing game?" "It's not about you being away," I interrupted, my voice still unnervingly calm. "It's about where you were and who you were with." Her face went pale, a color usually reserved for a particularly sickly hydrangea. The wedding plans, so meticulously scattered across the coffee table, suddenly looked like highly incriminating evidence at a crime scene. "I don't know what you think I saw you, Sloan, with Jasper at your parents' house." She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in 4 years, the master of personal branding had utterly nothing to say. "You care to explain that?" I asked. She took a shaky, theatrical breath. "Owen, it's not what you think. I ran into him by pure, unadulterated chance, and we desperately needed to talk about some old things, you know. We had unfinished business that I simply had to resolve before we embarked on our sacred journey of matrimony." "Unfinished business," I repeated, savoring the delicious irony. Yes, I simply had to be absolutely 100% certain I was completely ready for our marriage, that there weren't any lingering feelings or doubts from the past. I thought it was far better to confront the ghosts of old loves now in a grueling battle with my own heart rather than wonder about them later. I nodded slowly, pondering the sheer audacity. And this monumental, centuries-long journey of self-discovery and past reckoning took precisely 9 days. It was complicated, Owen. We had a lot of history to work through, a truly grueling psychological therapy session, if you will, necessary to purify my emotions. And you couldn't possibly mention any of this to me, your fiancé, the man you claim to be purifying your emotions for? She reached for my hand, but I recoiled as if from a particularly aggressive weed. "I was trying to protect you," she declared, her eyes welling up with what I suspected were well-rehearsed tears. "I didn't want you to worry about something that ultimately didn't matter. Whether or not my fiancée is emotionally involved with another man during her supposed familial solidarity mission doesn't matter." "I'm not emotionally involved with him," she protested, clearly struggling to maintain character. "It was just closure, Owen, just making absolutely sure I was making the right choice." "And what profound conclusion did you reach after this elaborate self-interrogation?" "That I want to marry you. Obviously, that's why I'm here, triumphantly returning with all these meticulously organized wedding plans." I walked over to the antique writing desk where I kept important documents, my will, property deeds, and our highly detailed wedding contract with the venue. I'd been preparing for this moment for 3 days, and I knew exactly what I needed to say, with the precise, detached clarity of a well-calibrated scientific instrument. Respect isn't something you can schedule around your emotional convenience, Sloan. It's not something you put on hold while you figure out whether you'd rather be with someone else. "That's not what I was doing!" she shrieked, her performance finally cracking. "You disappeared completely. No communication for 3 days. You lied about where you were and who you were with. You made me call your sister, who, bless her dramatic heart, had to cover for your deception with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. And then you walked in here with wedding plans, perfectly arranged with font types that resonate with the soul, and napkin folds that signify cosmic connection, as if none of that had transpired." I turned to face her. "What if I'd done the same thing to you? What if I'd told you I was going to help my brother, then spent 9 days with an ex-girlfriend, diligently working through our unfinished business?" She had no answer. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the raw, unpolished amateur underneath. "The ring, Sloan?" She stared at me for a long, agonizing moment, then slowly, with the theatrical precision of a fading star, removed the engagement ring from her finger. It was a beautiful heirloom, a simple diamond passed down generations, a truly sentient object now trembling on the coffee table as if suffering from this abuse of trust. She placed it carefully next to her scattered, now utterly meaningless wedding plans. "This is a mistake, Owen," she said quietly, her voice a mere whisper. "You're throwing away 4 years because of a misunderstanding." "No," I replied, my voice calm, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion, like a well-structured business report. "You threw away 4 years because you thought I'd accept being your backup plan. This isn't a tragedy, Sloan. This is a shrewd business decision to cut losses and restructure my life's investment portfolio." She left that evening without another word, gathering up her wedding plans like someone collecting the shattered pieces of a broken vase. Her grand theatrical production now abruptly canceled. I thought that would be the end of it. I was, as usual, delightfully wrong. The next morning, I awoke to a rather alarming flurry of 24 missed calls and over 60 text messages. Not from Sloan, of course, but from her meticulously instructed cast of supporting characters, her friends, her cousins, even her co-worker from the community art center where she dabbled in pottery. The messages all echoed the same exquisitely crafted theme. I was making a gargantuan mistake. Sloan was utterly, utterly heartbroken. Could I not see how much she, in her magnificent sincerity, loved me? By noon, a knock at my door, as insistent as a persistent vine. It was Lena, Sloan's best friend since childhood, now fully committed to her role as the outraged confidant. "Owen, what in the world is wrong with you?" she demanded before I could even offer a polite, botanically themed greeting. "Sloan is devastated. She made one tiny, insignificant mistake, and you're just throwing away your entire relationship." "Did she, pray tell, enlighten you as to the specific nature of this mistake?" I asked, arching an eyebrow, ever the dispassionate observer. "She said you saw her with an old friend and jumped to conclusions." "An old friend?" "Yes, and now she's at her parents' house, crying her eyes out because the man she loves won't even listen to her side of the story." I almost snorted. Even in crisis, Sloan was still managing the narrative with the cunning of a seasoned political strategist. Over the next few days, the social media campaign escalated into a full-scale media assault. More friends appeared at my cottage, their faces contorted into expressions of performative concern. Her mother called me 3 times, her voice a melodramatic symphony of pleading. Her father sent a terse message advising me to be less impetuous and consider what I was sacrificing. But the strangest part was seeing Sloan herself. She began making strategic appearances in places she knew I frequented, the artisanal bakery where I always bought my weekly sourdough, the cozy coffee shop near my office where I sometimes took lunch. She never approached me directly, but she'd position herself where I couldn't avoid seeing her, looking sad and profoundly wounded like a dramatically injured bird hoping for rescue, all for the benefit of the unseen audience. Then came the online offensive. I'm not particularly active on the digital stage, but several colleagues, intrigued by the unfolding drama, showed me her posts. Cryptic messages about learning to heal from betrayal and laments like, when someone you love abandons you right before your life's biggest moment. Photos of herself looking pensive, accompanied by captions such as, some people flee when love demands courage, when commitment means fighting for each other, not giving up at the first challenge. She was painting herself as the innocent victim of my cold-hearted abandonment, conveniently omitting the rather significant detail about spending 9 days with her ex-boyfriend while lying to her fiancé. The comment sections overflowed with her friends expressing manufactured outrage on her behalf and speculating wildly about my supposed character flaws. I realized she was attempting to control the story before I had a chance to present the unvarnished facts. That's when I, Owen Mercer, decided to unleash my own, far more subtle, counteroffensive. I spent an entire weekend crafting a document, not an angry rant or a detailed expose of her theatrical deception, but a simple, impeccably professional communication that stated the unassailable facts. I even had it reviewed by a lawyer acquaintance, ensuring it was utterly appropriate and devoid of emotional contaminants. Then, I printed copies for everyone who truly mattered. The letter, addressed to all wedding guests, family members, and close friends, read, Dear friends and family, after careful and considerable deliberation, Sloan Marlowe and I have mutually decided to cancel our wedding scheduled for the last weekend of October. We sincerely apologize for any inconvenience this unforeseen development may cause and appreciate your understanding during this deeply personal matter. All necessary arrangements and deposits have been handled with due diligence, so no further action is required on your part. Thank you for your enduring support over the years. Sincerely, Owen Mercer. I mailed them all on a Tuesday morning, then sat back and waited for the exquisite chaos to ensue. The response was swift, decisive, and wonderfully predictable. Within 2 days, Sloan's social media campaign evaporated like morning dew. The well-meaning but utterly misinformed friends stopped calling. The surprise visits to my usual haunts ceased completely. What I later gleaned through mutual acquaintances who maintained a commendable journalistic neutrality was that several people had begun asking Sloan direct, inconvenient questions after receiving my meticulously crafted letter. If it was a mutual decision, why was she posting about betrayal and abandonment? If they'd decided together, why did she seem so utterly unconvincingly surprised by the cancellation? Under the relentless barrage of truth, Sloan apparently broke down and, in a fit of uncharacteristic honesty, admitted to spending time with an old friend while we were engaged. Once that inconvenient truth escaped, her narrative of being the innocent victim collapsed completely, like a poorly constructed garden trellis. The social isolation that followed was swift and thorough, a weeding process of epic proportions. Even her closest friends began distancing themselves, not because they judged her for having doubts about the marriage, a perfectly natural human frailty, but because she'd tried to manipulate them into pressuring me, all while maintaining a meticulously fabricated reality about her own actions. As for me, I returned to my normal life with remarkable ease. I threw myself into my work, taking up extreme mountain biking on weekends and devouring obscure historical fiction I'd been meaning to get to for ages. I joined a Wednesday night quiz team at a local tavern and discovered I had a surprising knack for arcane facts, a testament to my ability to retain irrelevant data. 8 months later, I ran into Serafina at a charmingly dusty bookstore in downtown Asheville. She looked profoundly embarrassed, as if caught in a poorly lit stage queue, but approached me anyway. "Owen," she began, her voice a hesitant rustle, "I owe you an apology. I truly should have told you the truth when you called that day." "You were protecting your sister," I replied, ever the magnanimous arboreal enthusiast. "I understand the theatrical demands of loyalty." "No," Serafina corrected, a rare moment of genuine sincerity in her tone. "I was enabling her, and I've regretted it ever since. What she did to you was wrong, and I'm sorry I played a rather awkward part in it." I thanked her for the apology. She then shared a piece of information that cemented my relief. Apparently, Sloane's reunion with Jasper had lasted exactly just under a month after our breakup, and then he, too, decided he wasn't interested in anything remotely serious. She'd been reaching out to old acquaintances ever since, desperately trying to recapture something that, it turned out, had never truly existed. That conversation confirmed what I'd suspected all along with the clarity of a freshly pruned bonsai. I hadn't lost the love of my life. Oh no, I dodged a particularly vigorous and rather dramatic bullet. A little over a year later, I met someone new. Her name is Clara. She's a veterinary technician, a practical woman who deals with actual verifiable truths every day. And here's the astonishing part. When she says she'll call, she actually calls. When she says she'll be somewhere, she's actually there. When she travels for work, she sends me authentic photos of her day and texts me regularly. Not because she has to maintain a delicate facade, but because she genuinely wants to share her experiences with me. It's absolutely amazing how refreshingly simple trust can be when it's not part of a meticulously choreographed, deeply deceptive, dramatic production. These days, I occasionally hear updates about Sloane through the Asheville social network, a sort of local grapevine of gossip. She's still unattached, still posting cryptically inspirational quotes about finding authentic love and learning to trust again, presumably after the tragic betrayal by a man who simply preferred truth to theatrical performance. I feel no satisfaction in her struggles, merely a detached sense of observation. But more importantly, I feel no regret about my decision whatsoever. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about making someone pay for their dramatic transgressions. Sometimes, it's simply refusing to let them waste any more of your perfectly good time while you quietly, confidently, and without any pretense build something far better without them. Hey viewers, welcome to the channel. We're just getting started and your support means a lot. If you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Thanks for being here.